welcome to Appalachia Rising, the podcast that highlights the great things happening in Eastern Kentucky. Today, we have with us a really special guest. Her name is Janice Way. Janice, it's good to have you here.
Good to be here, Burton.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent. So I want to start off by talking about where you grew up, because I know you grew up right here.
I did.
So take some time, talk about what your life was like and your family, and then we'll go on to what you're doing now. But let's start off with a little history about who you are and where you're from.
Okay. Well, I did grow up here in Pikeville, or right near here, at least, on Island Creek.
On Island
for
Creek,
those of
which is over there.
Which is over there. My mom and dad had a small farm. It was my dad's hobby farm, but you know, animals in a garden, like so many of us in Eastern Kentucky. But really, my dad spent 35 years at Kentucky Power.
Okay.
And my mother was a first grade school teacher for 30 years. So everywhere we went, everybody always identified with my mother because she had probably taught them or someone in their family. And it's interesting about my dad, you know, as I said, he spent 35 years at Kentucky Power, loved his farm, had really no interest in going anywhere else.
Right.
But being that this is the 75th anniversary year of the invasion of Normandy, he was there.
Oh, really?
He was 82nd Airborne in World War II, and he was at the invasion of Normandy. And I think when he came back, he said, you know, I told God all through the war if he would get me home, I would never leave, and he really didn't. So my growing up years, we were all around here.
Right.
You know, we didn't really do a lot of vacationing and that sort of thing because my dad just really did love it here, and
Right.
just that was his roots, and we stayed.
So has he gone on, or is he still living?
Yes, he died about 10 years ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. Did he
Yeah.
ever make it back to Normandy? Did he go back and visit?
No, he
Yeah,
didn't.
so many folks did, but
I know, and I mentioned to him about doing that. I wanted to take him over there, and he said, I saw it once, I don't want to see it again.
yeah, well, I'm sure it's different now. Than
Very
it was then.
different now. Yeah.
So you grew up on Island Creek and went to school right here in Pikeville, Kentucky. Which
I-
elementary, middle, high, all the way through college?
I went to Mullins.
Okay,
When
very
Mullins was an elementary school and a high school. That's where my mother taught for most of her career.
good. All right.
So I
Did you have your
graduated.
mother?
No.
Oh, yeah. See, I got away without having my mother till high school, but I did have her eventually.
Well, the first 2 years, my mother actually taught in a one-room school.
Okay.
And the first 2 years that I could have gone to school.
Right.
So I went to Pikeville Elementary School. And then when I was in third grade, she got transferred to Mullins because that one-room school closed.
Gotcha.
And when she got transferred to Mullins, she took me. And so I finished third grade through graduation at Mullins.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then middle school,
At Mullins.
same one. And
Yes.
high school?
At Mullins.
At Mullins. So
Yes.
Mullins all the way through.
Mullins all the way. Mullins
All right.
Tigers.
Well, there you go. That's
56 in my graduating class.
How about that?
Yes.
That's a nice small graduating
is.
class. It's
It is.
wonderful. So then college?
I went to, first year, I went to what was then Prestonsburg Community College. It's
Okay.
now part of the Big Sandy system.
Right.
Because I had just been hired at the radio station, WPKE.
Oh,
Because I
excellent.
wanted a career in communications from the time I was in 8th grade. That was kind of my dream. And I was hired shortly after high school. And I didn't want to give that up. So I went,
Right.
it worked out perfectly, which is a huge testament to the community college system. So I got a year under my belt there and got to work at the radio station and sort of solidified my place.
Yes.
And then I transferred to Eastern, and I
Okay.
finished my undergrad at Eastern and came home on the weekends and the summers and worked
Very
at the
good.
radio station. And then I went on to University of Michigan and got a master's in telecommunications.
Okay. And that 2 years there in Michigan, or was it
Actually,
just a year?
just a year.
Just a year up there to get your master's.
Yeah,
Good.
I fast-tracked it.
Well, I don't blame you. It's kind of cold up there.
It's kind of cold up there. It is, and you would know.
That's right.
And I was also just kind of ready to get out and really do the work and make some money. And
Okay.
so I was able to get it finished
And
in
then
a year.
did you come straight back to Kentucky at that point?
I did.
All right.
My first job after finishing at Michigan was at KET.
Oh, okay.
So I worked for KET for about 3 years and did public affairs programming.
Right.
And then, ironically, one of the public affairs programs I did, we had a 5-hour live broadcast at the Courier-Journal on how to put a newspaper together. And, you know, the production process of a newspaper. This was in the 80s.
Sure,
So,
right.
you know, it's kind of a different time for newspapers then.
It was.
And it was hugely successful. So they decided to do it on a TV version. So we went to WKYT, Channel 27 in Lexington, and we did a 5-hour live broadcast, and I produced that and directed it, of how you put an 11 o'clock newscast together.
Oh, okay.
And very well received. And so about 3 days later, I got a call from the general manager at Channel 27 and said, how about coming to work for me? So I did. A few weeks later, I went to work for him. So I worked at KYT, and then we launched WIMT during that time.
Good,
so,
very good.
Yeah.
And then sometime along in there, this program came along
called Leadership
called
Kentucky.
Leadership Kentucky, and it kind of swept you away. Tell us about your experience as a student in Leadership Kentucky.
It did. Leadership Kentucky was started in, actually the group got together in 1984, which I'm going to divert just a little bit and tell you about the history.
Yeah.
I really think it's phenomenal that Leadership Kentucky was started by initially there were 4 of them in their 20s. And they got this idea, they'd heard about these local leadership programs. There were 3 in the state at the time. And they thought, well, why don't we do this on a statewide basis?
Right.
And they were all in their 20s, and they developed this statewide program. And they knew that they needed somebody older, somebody established, a statesman, to get behind it. So they went to Louisville and met with Wilson Wyatt.
Yes, I know that name.
Very well known, former lieutenant governor, and got his support. And they filed the Articles of Incorporation in '84, and the first class started in '85.
Okay, good.
So 35th anniversary that we're celebrating now. And I was in the 1987 class.
All right.
And that's when I was working at WIMT. And knowing what I know now about the selection process, I think I checked a lot of demographics. You know, I was from Eastern Kentucky.
Sure.
And I was in the media, and it was in the early years of the leadership program, and they wanted publicity about the program. They wanted people a part of it who would go back and spread the message, which is what I did. But it was such a tremendous experience, life-changing for me. As you know, from having gone through the program, you do learn a lot, and you get to see things that you would never get to see. I grew up in Eastern Kentucky. At that point, I'd lived here most all of my life, and I'd never been in a coal mine, inside of a coal mine, and I'd never been inside, nor did I want to be, inside of a prison. But that's what Leadership Kentucky does. It takes you into these experiences that you might not have had otherwise to really learn more about what is the life of coal mining and natural resources, and what does happen in our correction system and inside of a prison and what goes on in there. So I experienced that in 1987, and I made friendships that are lifelong. They're still my friends, people who were in my class, and I just sung the praises of Leadership Kentucky from that day forward. And now I get to run the program, and it's just such an incredible honor.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a second, but I want to go back just a little bit, because one of the reasons that we do this is both to tell the story from Eastern Kentucky, but then also to take programming that has been developed in the Commonwealth that we think needs to be replicated in the rest of the country. And I've lived in a lot of different states. I don't know of any of the states that I've lived in that have statewide leadership programs that are anything like Leadership Kentucky. So for somebody who's living in a different place, who doesn't understand anything about what you're describing, talk a little bit about how the program operates. And I mean, we just heard about the coal mine and the prison, but you know, what does a typical weekend look like? How many weekends are there per year? What sort of demographic do you get involved? Just dig into the program just a little bit and talk about it, because I think that's the idea worth copying that we want to lift up and say, this is a great story. So if you could dig back into that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Ironically, as wonderful as the program is, you're right, there are a lot of states that don't have a statewide program. And I think now there's maybe 30, 33 states, and some of them are very, very different from what we do. What we do is work very diligently to have diversity in every way. We want geographic diversity.
These are from the participants
From
now.
the participants,
Okay, right.
yes. So each year for the core leadership program, the one that's been around for 35 years, we have about 55 participants.
Okay.
And we work very diligently to have people from as far western Kentucky as possible and as far eastern Kentucky as possible, because we know that when they spend time together, they understand each other's
Right.
life, they understand each other's regions, needs, challenges, opportunities better. So we work very diligently to have representation from throughout the state.
Right.
Occupational diversity is very important. We jokingly say we could fill the program with bankers and lawyers from
Sure.
Eastern Kentucky, or from Central Kentucky and Louisville, and there's wonderful bankers and attorneys in Central Kentucky and Louisville. But what we really want are people from all occupational sectors. We want educators.
Right.
We want healthcare workers. We want manufacturers, because by sitting there and talking, not only during the sessions and the tours and the experiences, but in breakfast and lunches and charter bus trips to various locations, you really learn about what other people do and the challenges they face and the things that they're working on. This is a wonderful success story, I think, from the 2015 class. We had a library director from Western Kentucky and a lady who runs a science museum in Louisville. And you would think normally, what do these two people have in common?
Right.
Really not very much. But from that class and the friendship they formed, the science director at the Kentucky Science Center said, you know, I'm really looking for ways to share our resources outside of Louisville. I want people to be able to see some of our exhibits outside of having to come to Louisville.
Right.
So she and Christy, who was the library director from Western Kentucky, came up with an idea of having traveling exhibits from this science center all throughout the state at libraries. Those two people would have never connected, would have never come up with that idea had they not been in the Leadership Kentucky class together.
Right.
And that's just one example. Every year we have examples of opportunities where people form alliances and create relationships that would have never happened otherwise.
Right.
So that's the reason we look for people from all sorts of backgrounds to participate in the program.
Yep.
And then what we do is bring them together for 7 months, 3 days a month.
Okay.
And we have exercises for them to learn more about their personal leadership style. We talk about leadership, and sometimes I think people feel like leaders are famous people. Well, leaders are not always famous.
Right.
Famous people aren't always good leaders.
That's right.
And we talk about different types of leadership styles, how you can hone your leadership style. We talk about issues in the state that need leaders to participate. And we expose them to things that maybe they have never heard about or thought about before, like the tours that I was talking about earlier.
Right.
So for 7 months, they experience this for 3 days a month. And I say it's 21 days of a year that will change your life forever.
Right, absolutely.
And it just, really, unless you go through the program, it's hard to explain. It's just a relationship that you make. It's a lifelong experience, and you will draw on it for years to come at times when you never expect.
Right.
I was talking with an alum actually earlier today, and he had a work problem in a certain community, and he said, I just called a couple of my Leadership Kentucky alum friends from my class that live in that area, and I said, I'm having a problem with this. Who do I need to talk to? They connected him with the right person and solved his problem.
Yeah, and it's solved.
It's
Yeah,
solved.
And that story happens all the time.
All the time.
You know, I only know a limited number of Leadership Kentucky alumni because I'm a relatively recent graduate, and already I can see the connections that work so well across the state, and it's really fantastic.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, so 21 days.
21 days.
Diverse population coming together, learning not only about leadership, but about all the different kinds of businesses and educational opportunities, the civic and public responsibilities, the legislative agendas and issues that we have in the Commonwealth, all in an intensive for 21 days.
Right.
And then they go back to their normal lives, but they're changed.
But they're changed.
Right.
And what we find too is during those 21 days, you often see things happening in other communities that you think, this would work in my community.
That's right.
Another example, this is a few years ago, there was a session in northern Kentucky, and actually the Greater Cincinnati Foundation has a program called Impact 100, and women can donate money. It's a program for women.
Right.
They donate money, but then they get to vote. They hear representatives from various nonprofits talk about why they need funding, and then they vote on where they want their money to go. So they donate money, and then they decide where it goes.
Right.
Well, they heard about this, so one of our alums took it back to Owensboro, started a program like that in Owensboro. I just saw her earlier in the year. She said they have topped $3 million now that they have donated back to the community in Owensboro.
Yeah.
As a result of her hearing about this program in northern Kentucky, she brought it back to Owensboro.
Yeah.
So what we hope is if it works in Ashland, it might work in Paducah. And if it works in Paducah, it might work in Somerset.
That's right.
And it's okay. Good ideas can be replicated all throughout the state,
Right.
and that's what we want people to do.
Which is the whole point of
Which
what we're
is the
trying
whole
to do
point
right
of
now.
what we're
It's
trying to do.
taking these wonderful ideas. So Leadership Kentucky, your involvement as a student was in '87, but then you didn't just stay there. You decided to become a little more deeply involved.
A little more deeply involved. So over the years, I was on a committee or two here and there and helped. We have session chairs, which are alums in the various communities that we're going to, and they help us set things up. So I
Right.
was that a few times. And then about 4.5 years ago, the position as president opened up, and I thought, I want this.
Yeah.
You know how those light bulbs go off in your mind every now and then, and it always had been back there that if that job ever opened up at the right time in my life, I wanted to try
Right,
for it.
yeah.
And it did. The timing was perfect. And I went after it like a lightning rod. And fortunately, I was chosen, and so I've been there almost 5 years now.
Almost 5 years.
Yes.
Time just flies when you're having fun.
It does fly when you're
You've
having
been there
fun.
just a little bit longer than I've been here.
That's right.
Yeah, how about
In fact,
that?
I met you shortly after I took this position when you came here and encouraged you to participate in our new executives program.
So
which-
let's talk about the other programs then,
Yes.
because that's a nice segue. You've got, I think, 3 other programs. Is that
we
right?
do.
Okay, so talk me through those.
Well, the second one we started was the new executives program, which is what
Right.
you did. And what's really terrific about this program is it's one day and it's free of charge. Thanks to sponsors, it's free of charge. And what we want is for executives, senior level folks who are relatively new to Kentucky, less than 2 years is our preference.
Right.
We invite them to Frankfurt for the day, and they can bring their spouse. And it's all things Kentucky in one day. So we start out at the Capitol, and we hear from various cabinet secretaries, and they talk about some of the initiatives, especially economic development. We do this in conjunction with the Cabinet for Economic Development.
Right.
So they talk about some of the economic development initiatives that are happening in the state, some of the new businesses that are coming in, some of the programs they have to help new businesses or businesses in general. And so we spend the morning at the Capitol with cabinet secretaries and speakers, sometimes from the Kentucky Chamber, and then we do some fun stuff. So we go to a bourbon distillery, and we have a distillery tour and a little tasting because it is in the middle of the day.
That's
a little
right.
tasting, and many of them had never been to a distillery before. And then we go from there to a horse farm, because here again, if you're coming from Michigan or something,
right.
you may not have been to a horse farm.
Central Kentucky, you've got to go to a horse farm.
Got to go to a horse farm, and they get to really touch the horses and pet them and learn about what goes into running a horse farm.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work,
I
as you know.
think when I did this, I was just completely blown away because the grandsire of Seattle Slew
Yes.
was the filly or colt, I'm not sure which, that I got to pet, which was really kind of
Yes.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got to see, 2 years ago, we got to see American Pharoah.
Oh, wow.
That was pretty cool. Yeah,
No
that was
kidding.
a big seller right there.
That was the year after I got through that program.
Yeah, exactly. And then we go back and, we hear from the governor and more legislators, and really how to impact your business, how to make the connections you need to make for your business and your community.
Right.
And then we end it all at the governor's mansion for dinner.
Yeah.
So it's just a really nice day. As I said, again, no charge, one
Right.
day. And we have had that program now. We'll have our sixth one this year. And we've had a lot of people like yourself
Right,
who
yeah.
have been so enamored with all the wonderful things that are happening in the state that they want to learn more. So then they apply for our Leadership Kentucky program.
Right, right. Yeah, which I thought was one thing you left out. There is like an all-day commercial for Leadership Kentucky
Well,
that's
yeah,
embedded
that
all
too.
the way through that really good
Can't miss a
executives
good
program.
opportunity.
No, why should you? Absolutely not. So okay, so the executives program, and
Yes.
then you have 2 more programs.
Well, we have a program for young professionals. It's called Elevate, and it's roughly 25 to 35-year-olds.
Sure.
And they're young leaders. And this is a 3-month program because we know that young leaders cannot be away from work as long of a period of time.
Right.
So this is 3 months, and we really, with that program, we work more on actual leadership development. So we talk about how to have difficult conversations.
Right.
How to lead from behind sometimes, because you might be in a meeting with your boss and your boss's boss, but you have a great idea. So how do you promote that idea? How do you bring that up without trying to usurp the power of others in the room? So we talk about those things that most of us have learned the hard way over the years of experience, but we try to give them some pointers. So that's a 3-month program,
Okay.
Again, for 25 to 35-year-old.
And it's also statewide, right?
It
So you
is
try to
statewide.
recruit a
So
wide
all
variety.
3 of those programs are statewide.
Okay.
We have people from extreme eastern Kentucky to extreme western Kentucky, and we take them. Another point of the program is we want them to see communities that they would have not had a chance to see otherwise, or maybe never
Right.
go to. Unless you have a reason to, you might not go to Owensboro, but it's
Right.
such a beautiful community. So that's a good reason to go there. We took the Elevate class to Prestonsburg,
Yes.
and they might not have had a chance to see Prestonsburg recently, or until then.
Right.
So far they've just loved Prestonsburg. When we bring people to Eastern Kentucky, they always love it. And they're always so pleasantly surprised.
They are.
Because sometimes the narrative about our Eastern Kentucky is not what all we know it is, and the positive messages
Right.
that we want people to see about great things happening here.
Yeah, well, we just had a large network news program that I'm not going to name come into this room in this exact spot and film a story that we thought was going to be a positive story about a business in town, and they spun it all about opioids. It was the only thing they talked about. So you're right, when people come into this region and they experience it for themselves, they discover that the narrative is so much different than what they're hearing in the national press.
Right.
Yeah, so one more program, and this is the one that I know you're excited about because you and I have talked about this one, well, since the last board meeting.
Exactly.
Maybe even a little bit before that when we were working on some other things. So talk a little bit about the grant, talk a little bit about the new program, and this will not air until after it's all official. So you can talk with impunity.
Fully.
Everyone here is sworn to secrecy? All right, they're all sworn. Go ahead.
Okay, we're sworn. We're good to go. Well, we are very excited to start a program called Bright,
Okay.
Bright Kentucky. And it's exclusively a program for the 54 counties of the Appalachian Regional Commission,
Okay.
Kentucky counties. So there's 54 of them. Loosely, I kind of go like this, over here's Pikeville, so
Right.
it kind of goes from sort of Ashland over to Pikeville and then down a little past Somerset.
Okay.
And what the whole goal of this new Bright program is to build up the opportunities for bright young leaders, bright young minds, and bright new ideas that can be fostered in these Eastern Kentucky counties to really make the opportunities even more possible for people who have great ideas, and we want them to stay in Eastern Kentucky and
That's
make a
right.
positive difference. Just earlier today, I was meeting with someone, and they were talking about a training program that's happening here, and they said they're doing such a terrific job training that people are getting jobs away from this area,
right.
and they're leaving. What we want to do with this program is help the Eastern Kentucky region to keep more opportunities here and to help those bright young minds that are in this region to have more opportunities, to have better leadership skills, to have a better network, because Leadership Kentucky programs are all about networks.
Right.
So that when they have an idea, they have an initiative, they want to do something for their community or their business, they know who to contact and they know how to make it happen.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, good.
And so we have a grant from the Appalachian Regional Commission. It's a 2-year grant to offer this program. We hope to have about 40 to 50 participants the first year and 40 to 50 participants the second year.
Right.
And it's amazing to have a Leadership Kentucky program like this at no charge. The only cost that will be incurred by a participant is, if the session's in Somerset, they have to drive to Somerset.
Right.
But once they get there, everything, hotels, food, speakers, tours, supplies, are all paid for by this grant. And
That's
then we
great.
do have, as you know, with most ARC grants, you have to have matching funding. So we have matching funding from the Whitaker Foundation,
Oh, very good.
the Whitaker Bank family, the Whitaker Foundation, and then some others who have made contributions to help us get our match amount. And with those contributions, this is a free program.
That's fantastic.
It is, and we just feel like it can be a real game changer for the community, and I know the ARC feels that way as well. That's why they're supporting it, and we want to work in conjunction with, not in competition with anyone or any organizations,
Right.
but in collaboration with programs like SOAR and the local leadership programs that are in the various communities. In fact, many of those local leadership programs wrote letters of support for us for the
Right.
grant because they understood what we were trying to do. And we want to encourage them to offer participant suggestions. These are great people that should go through your program, because we just want to build up this region and we want to offer more opportunities for bright young minds.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And, it really will help, I think, to just infuse life into some of these folks who have such great ideas.
Yes.
And perhaps haven't made the connections yet to be able to implement those ideas right here in their home communities.
Right.
So it's a fantastic program. Now, I know something else about ARC programs. They want them to be sustainable over time.
That's right.
So I'm sure you're working on a model that will help to sustain this program.
Yes.
Is it a 3 days over 7 months, or how is the program structured?
This will be 2.5 days over 5 months.
Okay.
So it will probably be a July to November cohort is what we're thinking. That kind of works with the other leadership programs we do, plus hopefully by those months we will miss too many of the vacation opportunities,
Right.
because we want to be very careful and not have people need to miss a session because of a family vacation
Right,
or something
sure.
like that. But yes, and sustainability is important with all of Leadership Kentucky programs, as well as ARC funded programs. So yes, we're already starting to work on that. And what we're hoping is, just like with the other Leadership Kentucky programs, we will find benefactors that want to support. They will see the impact that this program can have
Right.
on the communities, and they will want to support that moving forward.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, Janice, thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think we've covered it.
All right. Well, I hope that we would. And I see my producer over there is giving me the we're running out of time sign. So I just want to say thank you for
Well,
coming. I
thank
appreciate
you.
that. Thanks for coming to Eastern Kentucky and for having this conversation.
It's always wonderful to come home.
Come home. That's right. Did you see your mom while you were here?
Absolutely.
Well, you better have, or that could have been a problem.
That would have been a problem.
All right. Well, thank you again for watching and listening to Appalachia Rising. And we're just glad you're here. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Appalachia Rising. For more information on this episode or others, visit www.upike.edu/Appalachia Rising.